Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we continue Strength of Schedule Week as we talk about the strength of schedule at the tight end position going into the 2020 fantasy football season. As many of you remember and or are familiar with the channel, I always talk about strength of schedules on a weekly basis during the regular season to give ourselves as much of an advantage or an upper hand in terms of who should I start at the tight end position, wide receiver, running back, quarterback, you name it. We always talk about strength of schedule, but I wanted to go ahead in the preseason and kind of give you guys an overview or a transparent look at what exactly we can anticipate going into the 2020 fantasy football season in terms of matchups and strength of schedule at the tight end position. So that's what we're going to do today. We're pretty much going to cover everything that I've calculated this offseason to kind of give us the best indication of who's going to have the most advantageous schedules going into the season. So without further ado, let's get into that. But before we begin, I want to go ahead and thank all of you for the continued support. I mean, you guys have completely stiff-armed that like button down below. I've asked to get past the 100 like button mark for the past two videos, and you guys have absolutely destroyed that. If we can go ahead and once again do that today, that'd be greatly appreciated. I'm trying to get down to the comment section, answer all of your questions. Again, thank you for the kind words. There's a lot of comments, so I'll try to get to them all. But again, if I don't get there, I apologize in advance. Outside of that, Andrew Kiorkof's 2020 Fantasy Football Draft Guide is now available. For those of you looking to find that, go down to the description of the video. You can find information regarding that. Outside of that, subscribe to the channel if you're new. And let's go ahead and let's talk about the tight end position. As you can see to the right of me, similar to the last two episodes when we talked about running backs and wide receivers, we have ourselves the tight end strength of schedule from the 2019 season. So defenses and how many points they allowed to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis on average in half PPR scoring format. So what we have on the screen, it was the Arizona Cardinals were the worst team in terms of stopping opposing tight ends. And that wasn't a surprise. I mean, they absolutely got destroyed on a weekly basis. I mean, there was a 7 to 8 game stretch last season where tight ends were scoring upwards of 10, 15 points a week on them. And it was just an automatic pick up the player that's going against them and start them. And it absolutely worked. Obviously, they've gone ahead this offseason. They've adjusted and they've gone ahead and added pieces either to the defense, to the linebacking position with Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson. So they're going to have a little bit better coverage. So that's why, even though this strength of schedule kind of gives us a little bit of an indication on what we can expect going into the 2020 season, it's not the perfect way of determining the upcoming strength of schedule, because again, there are going to be players that are going from one team to another, rookies that are being drafted that are going to be instant starters and instant playmakers that could potentially help these overall defenses stop the tight end position. But either way, the bottom team here with the Baltimore Ravens were the best team against the tight end last season. Again, the fact that they have new linebackers this season, Patrick Queen at LSU, you go ahead, you have to change up a couple of the safeties. You're missing Earl Thomas now. There's going to be a little bit different coverage in terms of what they're going to face at the tight end position. But either way, this is what defenses allowed to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis last season. Now, if you went ahead and you posted these numbers into the 2020 official schedule, we went ahead and we found that this was the upcoming potential of these teams and their tight end strength of schedule. So it would have been that the Minnesota Vikings potentially would have had the easiest strength of schedule going into this upcoming season. But the fact of the matter is that this is not the greatest way of determining strength of schedule. Sure, Minnesota Vikings could have had a great schedule, but as we'll see in a couple minutes, this in itself does not take everything into account. There are so many variables in football, and there are so many different changes that have taken place, whether it's injuries. I mean, players are getting hurt every single day, and these are going to be adjusted accordingly. But overall, this in itself kind of gives us a brief understanding of where teams kind of would have landed if, in fact, they played 2019 defenses. But now that we talk about 2020 defenses, we can go ahead, we can throw this on screen, and I'll go ahead and bow out and explain to you everything that is on screen right now. Here we go. So on the very left, I went ahead and I calculated the best coverages in terms of stopping the tight end position. Now, here's the thing. For the tight end position, a variety of players can defend them. We've seen cornerbacks step up and cover tight ends. We've seen safeties come down into the box and cover tight ends. We've seen linebackers, specifically Sam linebackers to the strength, cover tight ends. But every NFL defense is different, and there are always going to be different approaches to covering the tight end position. So I tried to accurately, dwindle it down to a point where, okay, I feel comfortable that this is the potential of this upcoming team. Because when we talk about defenses and playing to the strength, you always want to play to the strength of, the respective offense, which is typically where the tight end is. But I've seen it before. I've listened to interviews. Some defensive coordinators in the National Football League will count the strength towards where the running back is lined up or where the majority of the wide receivers are at. There are different approaches, and though majority of the Sam linebackers are the guys that are going to be covering the tight end position or a safety comes down, I try to encapsulate as much of the coverage linebackers, coverage safeties, and or corners who are used to cover tight ends on a weekly basis in my calculations. I took their average coverage score from last season, I added them all up, I divided it, and we ended up finding that the Los Angeles Rams per player on that coverage squad in terms of covering the tight end position were the worst amongst all teams. Second would be the Arizona Cardinals, which Arizona Cardinals were not really surprised about, but the Rams took a huge dip this offseason. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And the San Francisco 49ers and Minnesota Vikings with some of the best inside linebacker coverage. I mean, Fred Warner, you have Quan Alexander there, Greenlaw, and in the Minnesota Vikings, we all know, we've played Madden before. Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, these are the user linebackers that are absolutely monsters in coverage. Not a big surprise there to see that those teams are, one of the highest coverage teams overall in terms of the safety help, the corner help, and or linebacker coverage. So now that we had that kind of in place, and I calculated all of that, which was probably the hardest part, it was just implementing that into the upcoming schedule. So we go ahead, and if you play the Los Angeles Rams, you get a 1. If you play the San Francisco 49ers, you get a 32. We get all 16 games, add them up, divided by 16, and on average, we have ourselves the chart that is in the middle, the column that is in the middle, the official tight end strength of schedule for the 2020 fantasy football season, having the Dallas Cowboys with the easiest tight end schedule and the Atlanta Falcons with the most difficult. And it's a pretty significant margin between the two. Now, a thing that I wanted to go ahead and point out before we start talking about specific players in these total offenses this upcoming season. Last year, teams that targeted their tight end position more than anybody else, I'm going to be mentioning teams that targeted their tight end 20% of their total target share. All right, or more, of course, because, like the Ravens had a 40% target share for their tight ends. Eagles had a 38%, regardless. The Ravens, the Eagles, Raiders, Colts, 49ers, Chiefs, Rams, Titans, Giants, Vikings, Cowboys, and Lions. All of those teams targeted their tight ends 20% of the time or more last season. So that in itself is a great opportunity for those respective tight ends. So now that we see, okay, the Colts are in line because they always target their tight ends a lot. You get Phillip Rivers, perfect. The Cowboys always target their tight ends a lot. Even with Jason Witten last year, he was able to produce. Blake Jarvin steps in this year. You have the 49ers at the top of the list. You find yourself with the Eagles and the Ravens and the Detroit Lions at the top of the list here. Those are teams that I'm looking at and I'm getting excited because some of them, the rich are continuing to get richer. We have ourselves with, the two guys on the thumbnail. We have Zach Ertz and Mark Andrews, who have some of the easiest schedules at the tight end position, and they're the leading receivers of their respective offenses. That in itself, my confidence is, boosting by the minute in terms of these guys and what their potential is this upcoming season. But I want to go ahead and hop on screen real quick and again mention, do not get this twisted, all right? I'm showing you this to kind of give you an idea of who has the potential easiest schedule this upcoming season. I'm not showing you this so that you avoid specific players. As much as I've said this in the prior videos, for some of you, it doesn't get to you. Please understand that this is not a video to where you're saying, you know what? The Falcons, they have the toughest schedule at the tight end position. I'm completely avoiding Hayden Hurst. That shouldn't be the case because they had the top 10 most targets to the tight end position last year. Even though their target share wasn't as high as these other teams that I mentioned, they still targeted the tight end position a lot. And they're going to once again this year with Dirk Cutter as their offensive coordinator. They always want to utilize and at least feature the tight end in their respective offense. Regardless, do not allow these numbers to change your thought process on a player. If it ends up giving you more confidence in a Jack Doyle or Blake Jarvin this upcoming season, maybe Greg Olsen, Will Disley, then fine. But it should not make you avoid a player wholeheartedly. Again, the Chiefs always have some of the hardest schedules. Excuse me. They always have some of the hardest schedules. And Travis Kelce, despite all of that, is going to produce regardless because he is the best player on the field at times and nobody can cover him. Desmond King, will make some plays here and there for the Los Angeles Chargers and lock him down. But regardless, he is a monster. That should not, kind of steer you away from him and his potential. The Las Vegas Raiders, Darren Waller was the monster last year. He was the number 3 tight end in PPR, number 5 in half PPR. I forget, that mixed him up a little bit. Regardless, the fact that he got 117 targets last year should kind of lead us to the fact that he's going to be featured again this year. They want to use the tight end. They did it with Jared Cook the year prior. This shouldn't scare you. It really shouldn't. Overall, that's all I wanted to do. We'll go ahead and we'll talk about all these players in specific. I'll bow out again. All right, now before we continue talking about specific players, on the very right, that is the strength of schedule for the fantasy playoffs. Weeks 14, 15, and 16, you see the Seattle Seahawks with the easiest schedule because, again, they're probably going to be playing the Rams and the Rams and the Cardinals in those weeks. So that in itself, exciting. Mark Andrews, guys like Evan Ingram, Kittle, they have easier schedules down the stretch and in the fantasy playoffs. But we want to know who has the easiest schedule for the entirety of the season. So we look at the middle chart in the middle column and we talk about these specific players. Blake Jarvin. Jason Witten in a half PPR was the number 12 tight end last season. Blake Jarvin is a very capable tight end. We know that. But is he going to be given the ample opportunity in an offense that just drafted a first-round wide receiver, still needs to feed the ball to their respective running back 350 times this year? And Mike McCarthy is now your head coach. And from what we remember with Mike McCarthy, outside of being a red zone threat, the tight end position there has never been something that they want to utilize as heavily as other teams. So that in itself is a little bit of a struggle. But the Indianapolis Colts and Jack Doyle, we have to remember that the Colts have targeted the tight end position 290 plus times in the past 2 seasons. Whether it was with Doyle and Eric Ebron, it doesn't matter. They fed the ball to the tight end position. They're going to continue to do so because Phillip Rivers has done that his entire career. Let's not forget Antonio Gates and just recently Hunter Henry and what they've been, capable of and have accomplished in the last couple seasons with the Los Angeles Chargers. Regardless, we move on to Kittle. The rich get richer, perfectly fine there. The Seattle Seahawks always love to use the tight end position. One of these tight ends is going to get hurt. I mean, whether it's Greg Olsen or Will Disley can do it for the third year in a row, and Greg Olsen could do it for the third year in a row. Regardless, whoever ends up being the healthier tight end position there, they're going to have value because, again, their strength of schedule is super easy. And on a weekly basis, if you're playing against the Arizona Cardinals or the Rams, you want to go ahead and probably take advantage of that. We see the Chicago Bears at number 5. And that is a very interesting prospect here because from what the reports are showing, besides the unfortunate news that earlier today, David Montgomery was taken off the field with a serious injury to his knee. Hopefully, it all comes back clean. Maybe just needs a week off. I'm hoping the best for David Montgomery, okay? Regardless, the reports are saying that Nick Foles is a couple steps ahead or a couple inches ahead of Mitchell Trubisky at training camp. If that's the case, I'd love to see the utilization or rebirth of a Jimmy Graham. We know how much Nick Foles loves to use the slot receiver. Anthony Miller's value goes up. We know how much he wants to use or actively use Zach Ertz in the playoffs or in that season where he took over for the Eagles. That's a known commodity. If a guy like Jimmy Graham comes in and has himself another good year, I wouldn't be surprised. The Cincinnati Bengals are a very situational spot. I'm not sure how much tight end they're going to use. Of course, they still have CJ Uzomah there, but in terms of what's going to happen, they might even find another guy that could end up stepping up. But the Cincinnati Bengals, not a team I'm really looking for at this moment because, again, unless someone can consistently produce out of that organization at the tight end position, I'm not really too excited. Again, Tyler Eifert went to the Jacksonville Jaguars, for those of you interested. Regardless, number 7, the rich get richer. We have Zach Ertz there feasting. Number 8, we have the Baltimore Ravens with Mark Andrews having himself a great year. TJ Hawkinson at 9. Number 10, Gronk or OJ Howard. I mean, I was watching a little bit of film earlier today of Gronk at practice. He looks like he's moving well. I mean, he's absolutely got that extra gear of speed that he didn't have in the Super Bowl against the Rams. But all in all that's looking great. We go to move on. We see the Washington team. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, Eric Ebron could come in and make some noise there. We have Kyle Rudolph with number 13. Again, some of these teams have pretty good advantages this upcoming season. Some of these guys that we want to go ahead and potentially draft, middle of the pack, Evan Ingram still has injury history. Not a big deal. Jared Cook down there with the New Orleans Saints. You have ourselves, Tyler Higbee with the Rams. Jonnu Smith with the Titans, Hunter Henry with number 28 Chargers. Again, all in all, hopefully this kind of gives you an understanding of what exactly we can expect this upcoming season and what exactly we can anticipate for these players. At this moment in time, that's pretty much it. Hopefully this kind of gives you a brief understanding or an approach different than the normal approach of strength of schedules. Hopefully all the information that I provided was helpful for you today. If it was, subscribe to the channel. We'll be making more fantasy football content on the daily here for the entirety of the 2020 fantasy football season. On top of that, make sure you click the like button. I know you guys have done that a lot. Stiff arm the crap out of that like button. Help us get to that next mark. Try to get past the 100. Quarterbacks will be covered tomorrow, and then we'll go ahead and I'll have some nice stuff on Friday and this upcoming weekend. Outside of that, I want to thank everybody for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.